Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome you all to this web conference on ethnic cleansing of Hindus from Kashmir, issues related to conflicts in Kashmir and state of affairs in Pak occupied Kashmir. Before we start the proceedings, can I please lay down a few rules just for everyone's reference? Please keep your microphones muted till you're asked to speak. Question answer session will be towards the end, but you can still send us the questions on either the chat window or to the designated email which we have shared with you. Let me first introduce you to the moderator of today's session, Pradeep Gupta. Pradeep Gupta ji is based in Sydney. He has graduated from Delhi College of Engineering in 1976 in electronics engineering, worked in organizations like ONGC, Engineers India, Telstra, British Telecom, as a telecom engineer, as a manager. He's a recipient of many awards during his working life. Pradeep ji, I hand it over to you. From here on, you can take the proceedings forward.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome you all to today's web conference on ethnic cleansing of Hindus from Kashmir, issues relating to conflict in Kashmir, state of affairs in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, torture, humiliation of women, and human rights violation in Pakistan. This web conference is recorded and will be circulated for later viewing. This web conference is organized by Fact India Group. Now, what is Fact India Group? I'll just give a brief about it. Philip Reddock, who is a very senior member of ruling Liberal Party and ex-immigration minister, had participated in an event called Black Day Kashmir, organized by Pakistan-based elements. David Shoebridge of Green Party Australia had organized discussion on Kashmir with Pakistan-based elements on local TV channel SBS, in which they heavily bashed India and stated all kinds of lies, misinformation, and falsehood. David Shoebridge, with other Green Party MPs, had organized a debate on fascist India, again indulging in India bashing. We made strong representation to these MPs and their political parties, exposing the lies and misinformation. So we felt the need that there is nobody to project Indian point of view and state the truth about these issues. So we have decided to form this group so that correct and truthful information can be given to the Western world, who are very ignorant about these issues. Fact India Group is a volunteer-based, non-aligned, non-religious, independent, and non-sponsored group. I will now briefly provide you the background of the Kashmir problem. Pakistan has no locus standi in Kashmir, as at the time of partition of India in 1947, and as per the rules agreed between Britain, India, and Pakistan, then the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir state, His Highness Mr. Hari Singh Ji, had signed the Treaty of Accession to India, and the matter should have been closed then and there forever. But unfortunately, Pakistan sent its tribal warlords and goons to attack Jammu and Kashmir and occupied part of Kashmir, which is now referred to as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. India's Home Minister at that time, Mr. Patel, wanted to drive out Pakistani goons, but unfortunately, Indian Prime Minister at that time, Mr. Nehru, intervened and wrongly referred the matter to United Nations. United Nations had recommended plebiscite to know the will of the people, but placed the condition that both the nations need to pull out the army from the region before a fair plebiscite can take place. But Pakistan refused to withdraw its forces, so no plebiscite could take place. Special provision like Article 370, 35A were introduced in the Indian Parliament, Indian Constitution for Indian part of Kashmir as a temporary measures to diffuse the situation at that time. These Articles 370 and 35A were not passed by Indian Parliament, were illegally introduced in the Constitution, and the President of India at that time, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, was hoodwinked and coerced into signing these articles against the will of the member of the Parliament. The matter was not discussed in Parliament, as Nehru knew that nobody will agree to such absurd proposals. Mr. Modi had only undone the past mistake of Nehru and remove the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. Under Article 35A, hundreds of thousands of Dalits, the so-called untouchable Hindus, were denied citizenship of Jammu and Kashmir. They were called to clean the toilets of Muslim rulers in 1950s and were promised citizenship of Jammu and Kashmir, but that was never given. So these Dalits and their children can only work as toilet cleaners of Muslim rulers and cannot occupy any other post in the state, even if the children acquire medical or engineering degrees. The biggest genocide in history of mankind occurred on the weeks following 19th January 1990 under the Indian Home Minister Mufti Muhammad, father of ex-Chief Minister of JK Mehbooba Mufti, when more than 500,000 Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Christians were told to either convert to Islam or leave the state and were asked to leave their young wives and daughters behind so they can be distributed among the jihadis as sex slaves. Tens of thousands of men, women, children were raped and murdered. Hundreds of thousands of Hindu Pandits are living in other parts of India as refugees, as their houses, shops were confiscated and distributed among the jihadis. The idea of jihadis was to make the whole of Jammu and Kashmir Muslim-only state and separate the Jammu and Kashmir from India. Rohingya Muslims who are illegally migrated recently from Myanmar to India and Muslims from rest of the world were given local citizenship in Jammu and Kashmir, but Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists and Christians who migrated to state from 1945 onwards were not given citizenship of Jammu and Kashmir. Since Indian laws were not applicable in Jammu and Kashmir, no Indian agency can investigate any scams and misappropriation of funds by local Muslim leaders. Though India was spending billions of dollars in the state, but these funds were siphoned off by Muslim leaders. The children are studying and working in USA, UK, and these leaders have accumulated numerous properties and assets abroad. Jammu and Kashmir state remained undeveloped due to this mass corruption. Only Muslim-dominated areas in Kashmir were given much higher number of seats in state assembly, and representation from Jammu and Ladakh, where there was majority of Hindus, were given minuscule number of seats so that only Muslim party can rule the whole of Jammu and Kashmir state. Hindu, Sikhs, Christian girls are abducted in Pakistan and forcibly married off against their will to old Muslim married men and then forcibly converted to Islam against their will. The Pakistani administration and police is hand in glove with these culprits. Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, in India is introduced to give refuge to persecuted minorities, including Christians, in neighboring countries where they were denied basic human rights and dignified existence. Where else these people can go? Various countries have stated that they will decide who can come to their country and who cannot. So why India cannot do the same under CAA? No Muslim have been expelled from India till this. I will now introduce you to the today's panelist, Mr. Tariq Fatehji. He was born in November 1949 in Karachi, Pakistan, in Punjabi family who migrated from Mumbai to Karachi following the partition of India in 1947. He had graduated from Karachi University. He is a Pakistani Canadian journalist, author, political activist, and broadcaster. He advocates LGBT rights, separation of religion and state, opposition to Sharia law, advocacy for liberal progressive form of Islam. Some of his activism and statements have been met with criticism from right-wing Muslim groups and Indian liberal left. He calls himself Indian born in Pakistan, a Punjabi born in Islam, and vocal critic of establishment in Pakistan. To this end, Fatehji has criticized the partition of India. Our second panelist is Mr. Hamid Bashani ji. He was born in Rawalkot, Pakistan, administered Kashmir, POK. He's a Canadian broadcaster, lawyer, writer, political activist. He currently hosts a show, Third Point with Barrister Hamid Bashani on Canadian channel Tag TV. He has previously hosted the show Friday Night with Hamid Bashani on Rawal TV. He is a strong advocate for independence of Kashmir from Pakistan. He currently resides in Ontario, Canada, and runs his own practice in law. Hamidji is also Secretary General and Advocate International and was a student activist. Our third panelist is Mr. Sujal Panditji. He is a Kashmiri Pandit. He had graduated from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. He is a social activist, strong supporter and fighter for justice of Kashmiri Pandits who were expelled by Muslim Mujahideens in 1990 from Kashmir Valley. In September 1999, Sushilji set up a Hive Communication in Delhi and worked in many other media companies and rendered his services to charity organizations. He welcomed the Indian authorities' historic determination of cancelling the Article 370 and 35A. Our fourth panelist was supposed to be Ms. Clara Hall, but due to a last-minute serious health problem, she had to pull out of this web conference. She is in hospital, and we all pray for her speedy recovery. Her brief background is as follows. She is an Australian-based lawyer who traveled to Pakistan to meet a man she had met on Facebook, only to be imprisoned, beaten, and raped. She had been lied to by a Pakistani man, Sajid, and his family in Australia, and was promised a very luxurious and heavenly life in Pakistan. But that was all a hoax, a scam to lure Miss Lara to Pakistan, where her nightmare began and lasted for many months before she could extricate herself from the clutches of the devil and evil system of Pakistan, which is heavily loaded against women. Sajid attempted to force her into a life of Islam, marriage, and sex slavery. We have with us another panelist, Mr. Devendra Jain. He had graduated from IIT Kharagpur with masters from Columbia University, New York, worked for World Bank UNDP as a senior professional advisor in New South Wales Parliament. He is a recipient of Distinguished Services Award of IIT Kharagpur and Distinguished Alumni Award of Columbia University, New York. We have another panelist, Surinder Jain. He is an IT expert who has been doing social work after retirement. He is on the boards of many not-for-profit organizations. We have Ashrana ji, whom we have met before. He is based in Brisbane and he is a president of Kashmiri Pandits Australia and has been a community activist for the last 2 decades. Ashti runs his own boutique IT company and is involved in startup ecosystem within Australia, New Zealand, and India. Ashti is passionate about his homeland as well as work. He is a board member of Global Business Foundation for Kashmiri Pandits. Sir, now I'll start with questions to the panelists. First of all, I'll ask Tariq Fatehji. My question is, sir, why Pakistan is insisting on having Kashmir when it never belonged to it and will never be part of it, come what may? Pakistan is spending billions of dollars which it does not have on its military in the vain hope of wresting Kashmir from India. It could very well spend that money on its development and for the benefit of its people. Tariq Fatehji.
Well, good afternoon or good day, Australia. It is pretty cold out here. Let me assure you, there's tons of snow here. So the thought of warm weather in Australia is quite inviting. And let's get straight to the point. Let me assure you about one thing, that the fundamental question before us is not about Jammu and Kashmir. It is about the partition of India, which sliced away both limbs of Hindustan and left it for the first time ever in its history amputated. And this was done at the behest of the British colonialists, who after the end of the war were very worried about how the Soviet Union and its Red Army were poised right on the borders of Afghanistan. There were about 2 million men that they had. The Americans and the Brits were completely fatigued after that situation. And this artificial state was created as a buffer zone between any attempt by the pro-Soviet Afghan government of King Zahir Shah and the presence of the CPI, CPM in the Congress party. And this ability to slice away what is now Pakistan came about after serious discussions when Berlin fell to the Red Army. The first issue before the Europeans and the Brits was not about what would happen in Europe. The first concern was what would happen to the Indian Ocean and Britain's Indian properties or colonial territories. Now, if we cannot first analyze the first mistake that we've made in partitioning India, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir is irrelevant. At the time of partition, if the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir handed over, signed on to join the Republic of India, but the British military officer in what is now Pakistan occupied Kashmir or Gilgit-Baltistan handed over the entire territory to a British officer in Peshawar who handed it over to Pakistan without Pakistan having been there. We need to be clear as to where these mistakes were made and what are those consequences subsequently. And therefore, looking for a solution as to what is to happen to that part of the world, which I insist is central to the stability of the region, especially considering Australia's sinking relations with the People's Republic of China or Communist China, or China's imperialist interest within South Asia with its road and belt territory, with its CPAC, with the road going straight to the Indian Ocean through Pakistan, where Gwadar is a naval base targeting India. You see that in the larger context of being of the problems Australia has with China and the problems India has with China, and you come to the conclusion that the Pakistan issue, the Kashmir, becomes a side issue. Unless and until the Western world, or specifically in this case, Australia and its, I don't know whether to call them left-wing politicians or not. I support the left in Canada, but their inability to see that whether they like Mr. Modi or not, whether they appreciate what BJP has done or not, their interests lie in the security and stability of a democratic government in India, which will ensure that Islamism or the threat of Islamist domination in the territories will not come from Pakistan. So Kashmir is basically where you can find out what is the boiling point. What are the strategies that Pakistan is employing? What is the notion? What are the belief systems of not just Pakistanis, but dare I say, Pakistanis who live in India? Because mind you, Pakistan was only created because of the Urdu-speaking majorities in Bihar, UP, Bangalore, Madras, and Bombay. What is today Pakistan didn't want Pakistan. Frontier, from where all these tribes went and invaded India, Indian Kashmir, had a Congress government under Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, or who we call Badshah Khan. Balochistan was an independent country. Sindh, whose mention is there in the Indian national anthem, which Indians seem to have completely forgotten, the chief minister was assassinated by the Muslim League, Allah Baksh Sumro. And GM Sayyid, on a wrong promise, one vote got Sindh into Pakistan, and Punjab also did not elect a Muslim League government. So either we collect all these facts and figures together and say, what did we do wrong? And why Kashmir is merely a side story in this. We need to also be careful in not to call it the world's greatest genocide. It is deeply insulting to the Jewish community that 6 million people were slaughtered in 1945, and we then claim that the greatest genocide happened in Kashmir. This is erroneous. We shouldn't use terminology which makes us look as if we do not know what the world is going through. What happened to Hindu Kashmiris, not just in 1990, this has happened to Hindus in Kashmir for many times. The Karkota civilization, one of India's greatest empires, it was Kashmir based, went from Caspian Sea right up to the Bay of Bengal in the 8th century. It's wiped out. Nobody teaches anyone about it. You go to India's education system, the schools, the universities, they don't even tell you that Takshila and River Indus is the source of the word Hindustani. That the word Hindu is not even Indian. It is a mispronunciation of the word Sindhu. And our civilization comes from Sindh. Sindh hai to Hind hai. But apparently, the education systems in the last 75 years within India has focused on a very simple issue. You need an MBA, an engineering degree, or be a doctor, and don't think about politics. Let the politics be the monopoly of the Indira Gandhi family and the Nehru dynasty, and we will take care. You just go and make money. So today we have 3 million Indians living in the United States, even here in Canada, but the Khalistanis and the jihadis have a bigger say in the decision making of Canada and the United States. It sends one clear message. We need to be very clear within our home, within Hindustan, within its school system, that the word Hindu is not a 4-letter word. That people who are Hindus, when you accuse someone ke Hindu ki aulad hai, why is it so derogatory? Why do Muslims have the right to pray in India in tens of thousands of mosques, asking Allah to defeat the kuffar and let Muslims rule over them? If you are silent about that, then why are you talking about the Kashmiri Hindus? I'm talking the UP Hindus, the Andhra Hindus, the Hindus of Orissa or Bengal or whatever. We cannot focus it on one issue. That is just a window into the ideology of Ghazwa Hind, which Pakistan military, civilian, its Punjabi inferiority complex, where it refuses to allow people to speak Punjabi. They have to speak Urdu from Lucknow. It is a very distorted people. And what brings them together is the generated hatred of the land on which they live. They do not realize in Pakistan that Lahore and Kasur are cities named after the sons of Lord Rama. They have no clue. You could go there and they have no idea. Kesh and Love, what are you talking about? They have no idea about Bhagat Singh or Maharaja Ranjit Singh or Dula Bhatti also. So we are dealing with a completely ignorant but extremely ferocious people who want to die to start living. You have to understand that the aim of a religious Muslim is to trigger Roz-e-Qayamat, the end of times. So our transitory life on this earth should end, and we will all take our connecting flights to go to paradise, where there will be young women, dancing around and rivers of milk and honey. I really can't understand how people can jump into a river of honey, but that's a separate issue. But आपको ये समझ में नहीं आ रहा कि the intention of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Taliban or Deobandi or Barelvi or all this nonsense is the elimination of human civilization as the first step to have a never-ending life after death. Now, this is not necessarily Islam, and it doesn't matter because Islam is what Muslims practice. So one can argue that this is not part of Sharia, this is not that. That is a debate within Muslims. But for non-Muslims to be scared to such a degree that Mr. Biden has started appointing he's appointed 3 Kashmiri who are anti-India in his administration, after assuring Pakistanis that he will introduce Islamic studies in American schools. And yet everybody voted for him in the NRI class because his vice president is another person who's a complete fake, who had one piece of idli and everybody went into nervous breakdown and voted for the very person who would be anti-India. So our direction, whether you blame it on the current government or the last 70 years, is that there is no attempt to cast India as the world's greatest civilization. What part of contributing chess to this world is to be ashamed of? We are protected by the Himalayas. We never had an ice age. We have the world's highest density of population. Why? Because this is where people thrive. People often ask why there's so many Indians in India. Where you are protected, where you are nourished, where nobody asks you a question as to what your religion is. You can come. If you're Portuguese, alhamdulillah. If you're the English, okay, theek hai, aane do, dekh lenge. But to celebrate the people who plundered this country, how is that possible? I keep asking, why are there books in Old Delhi in Urdu celebrating Muhammad bin Qasim, and in the rest of India there is not even the knowledge of Raja Dahir or the attempt to have a road named after him? Because after all, he was the first man to stand up to the invasion of India. Kisi ko pata hi nahi. Like this blanket absence. A country who claims, that is Pakistan, claims that we came here to destroy Hinduism and Muhammad bin Qasim is a hero. What are you going to talk to them about? Why are you doing trade with them? And you should talk to the Australian politicians. There is only one thing worthwhile that was said by Sir Donald Bradman in 1948. He said previously we used to have to play with one Indian team. Now there are 2 Indian teams. What he didn't realize is that the Pakistani test cricketers didn't like that. Although Abdul Hafiz Kardar, Amir Ilahi and all the Fazal Mahmood had played in the 1946 series in Australia when they went there. The Western understanding of Pakistan is tainted by the view that these were our allies in the Cold War against communism. And India, because it was neutral and head of the non-aligned movement, did not play its part in defeating communism. Well, that was not India's problem. India had to win freedom from 200 years of British rule and 500 to 600 years of plunder that was carried out by Central Asians in the name of Islam, from Mahmud Ghaznavi to, and he too faced defeat in Kashmir. We are devoid of the sense that if Kashmir is not India, then there is no India. ये कैसे मुमकिन है? How can we get away by this thing by saying, oh yes, we kicked out the Pandits? You didn't kick out the Pandits, you kicked out Kashmiris. The rest of you have converted under pressure of Like my parents, we converted to Islam in the mid 1800s. We were in Rajputana. We came to Punjab. Maybe the famine, maybe, who knows what happened. We became Muslim in Kasur. So what is the problem that the Indian frame of mind doesn't become, without becoming hateful, stands up in pride about Hindutva? And to any Australian listening to this, if you can be an Australian nationalist, if Britain can be proud of its heritage, if in the United States you can wave the flag, what is it about India that it cannot proudly say that it is a Hindu country? Why should it bother the Muslim of Bhopal or Lucknow or Pakistan, Islamabad or anywhere else?
I'll try to answer your questions. You raise a very good point.
One second, let me just, there are 45 or somewhat other Islamic countries. If you feel you cannot live with Hindus, please go to Pakistan. If you still want to never have an Indian name, do you know this? That in 1,000 years, a Muslim has never kept an Indian name. They always name their children after Arabs or Uzbeks. But Turkey also has Muslims, they have Turkish names. Indonesia has Indonesian names. Iran has Iranian names. Khomeini is not a word from Arabic. Arabs have Arab names. Why is it that the Indian subcontinent's Muslims have been asked that you will never ever take any word from Sanskrit as your name? So Zafar and Vijay mean the same thing, but you will never find someone called Vijay Khan. Zafar Khan hoga. So those are fundamental issues that need to be addressed for the next 100 years coming, because if there is no Indian democracy, if there is no India, if it is trying to fall under Chinese imperialism, say goodbye to democracy in the West, because you right now do not even have the capacity to stand up to China. That's a very sorry sight. You cannot stand up to anything. They destroyed the world by their COVID-19, and you couldn't do anything. You can't even call it a China virus. So I leave it at that. There might be many questions that can be answered, but I fully endorse the pain and suffering of the Hindus who were expelled from Jammu and Kashmir in 1999, but who have been expelled for the last 500 years from Kashmir. Time and again, people have thrown them out. And this has to stop at one day. And that will only happen when Gilgit-Baltistan will be reintroduced as sovereign part of India. And my friend Hamid Bhashani will talk more about that in a second. Thank you very much. It was nice talking to all of you.
So I just mentioned, you gave a very good point, sir. But I'll say why India is not acting as you were saying, because it's of too much democracy. This government is only there with 40% of people voting for it. Now 60% consisting of Muslim population who never vote for BJP.
No, there's no 60%. Muslims are not more than 18%.
No, okay, Muslims are 18-20%, but then there are, jihadis, the left-wing parties, the left-wing liberals who don't like BJP or right.
Let me interrupt you one thing. If you're ruling out democracy, you're doing nobody a service.
No, I'm
you
not
say
ruling
this is
out.
the problem of democracy, then you're admitting a failure.
No, I know, I understand that.
How can 80% say that they are at the mercy of 15%? No, that's not right.
Hindus are divided, sir. Hindus are divided.
Everybody is divided. You think in Pakistan the Muslims killing Muslims are not divided? You think the Qadianis and Shia and Sunni are not divided? Who is not divided? In America, the Republicans, Democrats are divided. Please,
No, no.
sir, this
I
notion,
understand that.
this is a very dangerous notion that democracy is at fault. It's not at fault. Please, this is the slow, slippery side towards fascism that will not serve a purpose. And mind you, this is what the Pakistanis will go and tell Australian and American legislators. Look, that guy over there, he said, we do not need democracy.
No, no,
The
no.
case
I'm
is
not
dead.
saying that. No, we certainly believe in democracy. I'm just saying because of the, like in China, there is no democracy and they can take whatever action they want. But in India, like government cannot do a very strict action, as you mentioned, that you take a strict action against who is acting against the Indian state. Now you see, for
One second,
everything,
sir.
there is a protest in India.
No,
For
no, no.
tea.
One second. Who is stopping India from declaring Pakistan as a state sponsor of terrorism?
That
Who
India
is
has already
stopping?
done. India
No,
has already done that.
no, sir. Aapka regular pyaz, tomato you get from Lahore, you do that dance at the border. You cannot stop anything, sir.
Sorry
If
to
I
interrupt.
lower the price, yeah, Pakistan is selling, Pakistan military manufactured cement is into India.
Sorry to interrupt,
This
Tariq ji.
attitude of trade, yeah, that has to stop.
We'll be getting into that question answer mode again once more.
All right,
Pradeep ji, and just for everyone's reference, I have disabled the chat functionality for 5-10 minutes for last 10-15 minutes because there were some technical issues. So just to update everyone, I will be starting the chat again. If you have any questions, please put it on there. Pradeep ji, you can move on to Hamid Bashani ji, please.
Right, right. Okay, sir, Hamid Bashani ji. Now, I just want to know from you, sir, what is the situation in Pakistan, occupied Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan? Are there any severe human rights violations, suppression of fundamental rights, and democracy? Hamid Bashani ji.
Thank you very much. I think this is very straight question. You know, these territories, they are under the administration of Pakistan. And when we talk about the human rights situation in Pakistan, we can see very clearly that there is no respect for the fundamental and democratic rights of the people of Pakistan itself, where there is a direct so-called democratic rule in the country. And there is a constitution which apparently guarantee to the people of Pakistan for their fundamental rights. And there are courts and all that system which also at least talks about the protection of the human rights and civil liberties in Pakistan. But as we can see every single day, the incident of gross violations of human rights and the all news which you also read. So when you talk about the territories administered by Pakistan, then you don't need to ask that question because you can guess that how those territories would be treated. That's very obvious in absence of any constitutional protection, in absence of any credible democratic system in place, in absence of any direct rights for the people of those regions to exercise for themselves. So obviously it's a kind of a double kind of, you can call it suppression, the people of those areas they are facing. And why they are doing that, let me give you, obviously you and many learned friends, they know everything, but there will be many people maybe listening this video first time. So let me give them a context that why I'm saying that. There are so many reasons. I wouldn't go to the history because it takes a lots of time, but let me give you just a very brief thing as you mentioned it, and then my learned friend Tariq Fateh also mentioned that what happened in 1947, first of all, these territories, they were neither granted to the Pakistan, nor they decided themselves to be the part of Pakistan. These territories, they came under the occupation because of the situation going through at that time. So let's see first the territory of, I call it Azad Kashmir, you call it Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And by the way, why I always call it Azad Kashmir and not Pakistan occupied Kashmir, because it has the official name Azad Kashmir, although it's not Azad by any means. So the people in Pakistan officially under the influence of government called state of Jammu and Kashmir Indian occupied Kashmir, which I never said that. In different phases since I've been speaking or writing for last 30 years, I never mentioned that word Indian occupied Kashmir. And I don't want to mention this word here, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, because I think these are the blame words both countries are using against each other. So I called it either Pakistan administered Kashmir or Azad Kashmir. But I don't mind if you call it POK. I agree with that because that's the real status of the territory. So what happened at that time? These two territories, they were connected by the administration of Maharaja Hari Singh. And at that point of time, I'm talking about the time of the partition, he was the only legitimate ruler of this former state of Jammu and Kashmir, which included Gilgit-Baltistan, which included Pakistan occupied Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, all these 5 units. He was the only legitimate decision maker. So he decided to not have accession to Pakistan or accession to India. Instead, he decided to have a standstill agreement with the both countries to continue his status as before. Standstill means as he was running the state of Jammu and Kashmir before. State of Jammu and Kashmir was part and parcel of the Indian subcontinent, but in most of its period of time, it has been a semi-independent, autonomous kind of a territory where Maharaja Hari Singh was running on his affairs. There was a visa for entrance in the state of Jammu and Kashmir for anybody outside of the state. As I said before, as a visa or permit, you can call it. And Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was arrested when he tried to enter into Kashmir without permit. And same was going to happen to Qaeda-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, but he requested for the permit to enter. So you can see how Maharaja Hari Singh was looking at his state and how he was thinking that he is entitled to keep his privileged position, which he gained because of 2 reasons. First of all, Maharaja Hari Singh belonged to the Dogra dynasty, which was running the state since 1846. And this state they were the founder of the state as a Dogras. Before that, there was no such a thing on the face of the earth, which you call state of Jammu and Kashmir. Before that, there was a Kashmir, and then there was a Jammu, without having any connection other than maybe couple of wars or conflicts. So Maharaja Gulab Singh, the grandfather of Maharaja Hari Singh, he founded this state, and there are lots of talk about that, how he did, what kind of arrangement he had with the British people, how much money he paid, how many territories he really fought for, but ultimately he became the founder of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And since then, for 100 years, his son and then nephew and grandson, they ruled over the Kashmir till 1946, when we came across this situation, the partition situation. So at that time, I can understand why Maharaja Hari Singh was trying to do that, to keep his special status within the Indian subcontinent. Let me tell you another thing, that Indian subcontinent has always been a very, very diversified uh, region with lots of states, Rajas, Maharajas, Jagirs and all kind of small units. And some of them were totally independent. Some of them were even having some kind of foreign relationship. But India had no problem with that kind of diversified situation, is because that was the India used to in different period of time. So Maharaja had all the right to take that stand which he took. He signed the agreement with India and Pakistan. India refused to sign. India told him that we are thinking about it. However, Mr. Jinnah signed it right away and undertook to provide to the state of Jammu and Kashmir food and some postal services and some other things. That was in 1947, August 1947, within 15 days of the partition of India and Pakistan. And then After that, obviously, as you can see, and why I'm saying for the new people, that at that time there was a big game going on in the Indian subcontinent to get more and more states to access with India or Pakistan. And both were trying a lot, but obviously there was no comparison because there was 562 states, and out of 562, almost 562 states had already decided to go with India. There was no question about it. So there were a couple of states left there in a situation like this, in which state of Hyderabad, state of Junagadh, state of Jammu and Kashmir, few states, they were undecided. And they were undecided because of, as I said, their special historical and political status. So that game of grabbing the state when it was at its peak, then obviously in Pakistan, the people who were ruling, they decided to grab the state of Jammu and Kashmir. As you can see, they call it Sharag, and the most important territory for their survival and things like this. So they started multiple channels to grab the state by other means other than democratic means. Why I would say other than democratic means? Because Mr. Jinnah and his political party, Muslim League, was not in the favor of giving the people of any state, including state of Jammu and Kashmir, the right to decide if they want to be the part of India or part of Pakistan, or if they want to maintain their own state. Mr. Jinnah was very much clear on that, as well as Muslim League, because of what? Their policy was divide India. So when their policy was divide India, then they were not in favor of any state. They had no problem with any state if they want to be independent or want to be separated, or if they want to keep their own status, because their purpose was being served by doing so. So first of all, they ignored the states for a long time, from 30s to almost 36, 8. They did not pay any attention to the states. They did not form their political parties. In fact, many delegation from the state of Jammu and Kashmir visited Mr. Jinnah and asked him to form his Muslim League in the state. And he refused to do so because he hadn't formed a Muslim League in any state in all over the India, as you can see. He was concentrating on the provinces. His total politics was focused on the provinces and its future. And what he was wishing to get the Bengal and Punjab undivided. And there was no question in his mind that it can ever happen that he will get the divided Bengal and divided Punjab. The planning was that the Muslim League ideologue, what they were thinking, that if the Punjab and Bengal will come to us, then obviously there will be 12, 13 neighboring states left with no option but to come to us, like these Punjabi states and Rajputana states, because of their geographic proximity and because of their business and trade and economic affiliations with Bengal and Punjab. But when they came to know that no, we are not getting the whole Bengal and we are not getting the whole Punjab, and they were totally disconnected with all these states because of these things they were thinking, then they started running. And these task was given to the Pakistan military, who was trying to organize in the initial stage at that time. So there were like couple of 4 or 5 gentlemen sitting in the general military headquarters in Rawalpindi, namely Major Tarak, Major Sher Khan, and couple of others. And they were the people who were appointed by Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan in an official meeting to go and handle the Kashmir. To handle the Kashmir means you do whatever you can do in Kashmir to make it a part of Pakistan, but make sure that you are not visible in that territory, and nobody can blame Pakistan as being interfering into the situation. That was the policy. So these 3, 4 measures, they organized some people in at that time in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, gave them some arms and ammunition from the GHQ, from the Punjab police. And at the same time, this task was actually depending on Khan Abdul Hamid, who was governing in Pakhtunkhwa at that time. It was frontier, northwest frontier territories. And he had very close ties to these armed groups and the tribal groups there, and he prepared them and gave them logistic support and gave them officially money and ammunition to enter into the Kashmir. So at one part, there was an official agreement with Mr. Janab, giving Maharaja Hari Singh a kind of satisfaction that nobody is going to interfere in the Kashmir affairs. And at the same time, there was a raid, which was organized officially by the General Military Headquarters as well as Muslim League commanders and leaders sitting in the Pakhtunkhwa. So I believe that was a kind of backspat to Maharaja Hari Singh. It was a great betrayal because he was made to believe that he can depend on the Pakistan after signing the standstill agreement. But there was a raid and there was a bloodshed, and then the situation got out of control in the whole region, which include my region from where I came, Rawalakot, Punch, where we had like more than 20,000 military, ex-military men coming back from the Indian Army, Indian British Army. Some of them retired and some of them they were still serving people. So they were all organized under the auspices of GHQ, General Military Headquarters, and with the official treasury managed by Khurshid Anwar and Khwaja Ghulam Muhammad, and with the help of Liaquat Ali Khan, who was the decision maker. So it was an official first proxy war organized by Pakistani Prime Minister into the state of Kashmir. And at that time, what happened, we are talking about the ethnic cleansing. That ethnic cleansing happened into my area, specifically in the area of the district of Punch and the area now we call it Azad Kashmir. That all the Hindus, most of them Pandits, they call themselves Pandit and they call themselves Brahmins. They were attacked. They were part and parcel of that society for centuries. Most of them teachers, most of them social workers, most of them kind of leading element in that territory. They were all slaughtered and the rest were forced to leave the place, and they went to the city of Punch, where you have seen that there was a siege for 1 year in the city of Punch, where most of the population took refuge, were Hindus, Pandit, Sikh, and the other refugee running from that part of the territory. So that was historically why I said that this is not the decision of the people of those territories to be the part of Pakistan. This is not their consent to be governed by the Pakistan or by the Ministry of Pakistan of Kashmir Affairs. They were forced to be in that situation. And then the question is, do they have rights after that? So after that, if I go to the detail, these all seminar is going to be I'm going to take the whole time, so let me be brief. That after that, what happened in both territories? In Galgit-Baltistan, they didn't even bother to talk about any fundamental rights or democratic rights or anything until up in 1974 when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto made some small changes, and instead of giving the rights to the people of that territory, he allowed the people from outside to go there on the religious basis. For example, the Sunni majority people were allowed to go there and buy lands and settle down there. So because of the ethnic situation there. Same thing in Azad Kashmir. But in Azad Kashmir up to 1970, there were no election, no democratic rights. There were only one party, the party which was used by the Pakistan military at the time of rebellion against Maharaja Hari Singh. That party was officially appointed as the only single political party of that region, who can represent the people of that territory. And this was a notification which was issued by the Ministry of Kashmir Affairs and circulated in all government offices. That means it was a mandatory order from Islamabad to the people of that territory to follow the Jammu Kashmir Muslim Conference, who was at the forefront in the fight against Maharaja Hari Singh and the fight for the division of that state. So there were no election, no fundamental rights, nothing. So after that, do they have political rights, constitutional rights to make a decision in their favor, both in Galgit Baltistan and Azad Kashmir? The answer is no, because both to run the both territories, there is a council of Kashmir Council in Islamabad who has the supreme decision maker authority. So without their prior consent and without their approval, no legislation of any considerable consequences can be done in Azad Kashmir and neither in the Galgit Baltistan. So constitutionally, the relationship between Galgit Baltistan, Azad Kashmir and Pakistan is a totally illegal, illegitimate relationship which has no constitutional validity. This relationship with the Galgit Baltistan becomes more like colonialized and oppressive because of the 1949 pact, which was signed by the government of Pakistan and government of Azad Kashmir, in which it was decided that Galgit Baltistan should be handed over to Pakistan to run all its administrative and legal affairs. And not a single person from Galgit Baltistan was consulted or asked to be the part of that process. The whole nation was handed over by a government from Azad Kashmir to the government of Pakistan without even letting them know. So that situation prevails until even today. And the similar situation in terms of constitutional arrangement prevails in the Azad Kashmir too. The question number two, do they have any economic rights? Can they make any decision about their taxes, about collecting their taxes or making laws with financial consequences? Any financial institution, can they develop their own bank? Can they do any trade? Things like that. The answer is no. They have no financial power. So financially, they have no freedom or no authority to make any decision. The only thing left after that is, do they have any social or political rights to exercise? The question of civil liberties in both territories does not exist at all. What actually happened in Azad Kashmir, why the ethnic cleansing was done in 1949, because it was the basic idea was to cleansing, that this is a territory of 100% Muslim and no other person can reside or survive here. That's why there was a brutal attack and assault on the minorities, on the Hindus, on the Sikhs. The only minorities they existed there and survived at that time after that assault was Christian. And why they survived? Because Christians in that part of the Kashmir were the servant to do the dirty jobs, which the local people wouldn't do. And they were Christian because I think they have taken kind of a refuge. They were Christian apparently, but in fact they have taken kind of refuge in exchange of their services. So they were not saying anything to them because they were thinking that if they will leave, who is going to do this work? And even up to today, if there is any couple of 100 Christians all over the Azad Kashmir, they are there because they are cleaning their gutters or they are doing the things which they are not willing to do themselves. So what happened is a 100% ethnically cleansed state, no diversity, no tolerance. And at this point of time, I really think about the time when very old books I used to read, for example, from old Greek and Roman civilization, where people were talking about things like this. Do you have a right to think? Do you have the right of expression? Do you have right of adopting a specific religion or practicing that religion? These all things are impossible because right now there is 100% Muslims and 99.9% of them are Sunnis in Azad Kashmir, and obviously you don't see a conflict because all of them, they are doing the same thing. But if you go into the detail, not a single person can survive in Azad Kashmir who has a difference of opinion. If it's a politically difference of opinion, or is it socially or religiously, or even by any means, if you have a difference of opinion, you cannot survive. That reminds me a very famous quote from one of the philosophers that is very easy to save the people from oppression of the rulers.
Sorry, Bashaniji, just one last minute. Sorry, Bashaniji, just one last minute before we move on to the next one, please.
So it's impossible to save somebody from the oppression of the majority. So that is the situation which was in Azad Kashmir, where the ethnic cleansing was done way before what happened in Srinagar. What happened in Srinagar in 1980s, that was actually an action replay, but in a different time, in a different shape. There are lots of explanation they are offering. Who the governor was responsible or this was responsible. But let me tell you one thing, that was a clearly ethnic cleansing based on the religious hatred. It had nothing to do with the freedom fighting. It has nothing to do with the liberty. It has nothing to do with the right of the people to the self-determination or any other democratic right. So as we speak, this situation stands in all the Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir at the same time.
Okay. So have we got Mr. Sushil Panditji also joined here? Has he joined?
Pradeepji, no, Sushil Pandit ji has faced some technical difficulties. So Bashaniji will just come to you, but we have got Vidyadharji, so who is from Canada also. So we have a Canadian panel today. So Vidyadharji, welcome on the panel. If you would like to share some details about what happened to us, which I'm part of the same fraternity, Kashmiri Pandits, and just a bit of a background. Tariq Fatehji wants to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want Mr. Bhashani to explain why he does not consider Pakistan occupied Kashmir.
Sorry, before Bashaniji, sorry, Tariqji, before Bashaniji says anything on that, we will hear from Vidyadharji and we'll go to the question answer, and then I will take that as the first question.
Okay.
Is it fine, Pradeepji?
All right, that's fine.
Thank you. Vidyadharji, over to you.
Thank you, Pradeepji. Thank you, Aji. And my namaskar to all of the panelists and the speakers and all the guests. My name is Vidyabhushan Dar. I was born in Srinagar and I have seen everything as a first person. So, I mean, our ethnic...
We can't see you anywhere. So.
Can you see me now?
No. We still have Mr. Bhashani in the frame, but
sorry, Tariq Fatehji, thank you. Sorry, that was my fault. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough. Yes.
Okay. Back to you, everybody. So I have seen it all basically. Now our ethnic cleansing or our exodus is not a new story basically. It all started from the day militant Islam landed in Hindu Kashmir way back in 13th century with Kashmiri dynasty.
Yes.
So for the information of all the people who are going to watch this video later, let me tell you that, 1990, January 1990, which we call our Exodus Day, is not our first or second or third Exodus. It is our seventh Exodus in as many as 480 years at the hands of militant Islam. So the modus operandi has always been the same. Whether it was Shamir's time, whether it was Sultan Butchikan or the iconoclast time, or whether it was the time of Farag Abdullah and his gang. The modus operandi was exactly the same. We were given, in 1990, we were given only three options. And I'll translate that from Kashmiri to English. It was Relu, Selu, or Gelu. Either you convert to Islam, or you die, or you flee this place. That's exactly what happened to us in 1990. 500,000 people, Kashmiri people, Kashmiri Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, people who were not followers of Islam, had to flee the valley, leaving their herd and hearth behind, leaving their legacy of 5,000 recorded history behind. We belong to Kashmir. Kashmir is considered to be the fountainhead of the Indian cultural ethos. Half the Vedic work was basically written in Kashmir, whether it was Panini's grammar or Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, or whether it was Kalan's Rajtarangi, everything came from Kashmir. That is the profoundness of the Kashmir and its value in current system. I mean, history was always whitewashed by the vested forces which have been ruling India for the last 70 years, as Tariq Fatah rightly mentioned, that our history was basically maligned by the people who were basically at the helm of affairs, starting from Maulana Azad, the first education minister of India. Now back to our ethnic cleansing. Now I would like to tell the panelists and all the listeners who are basically going to watch this video later that criticism can be done in many ways. Now extremism which we faced in Kashmir right from 1947 under the Sheikh regime was on a different was of different nature. Now extremism or terrorism is not always with guns, gentlemen. It can be done in different ways. The moment Sheikh Abdullah came into power in 50s, the first thing what he did to Kashmiri Hindus was enacting the Land to the Tiller Act. Overnight, all the Kashmiri Hindus, they became paupers and they were reduced to basically, begging around for jobs because they were landowners and the land was snatched from them and given to the Muslims, who were the tillers of the land. The second thing what happened to us on the exact lines of Pakistan, that Urdu, which had nothing to do with Kashmir, was forced on us. And gentlemen, I tell you, Urdu is the official language of Jammu and Kashmir, and which is changing now after the Article 370 has been revoked and abrogated. Urdu was forced on us. And I'll tell you here that I was one of the students where a definite divide was created in the government schools. Hindus will read Hindi, Muslims will read Hindi. Muslims will go for Urdu and Hindus will read Hindi. So it was a different divide and it was so obvious. I have not read Urdu and my Muslim friends in Kashmir have not read Hindi. So after a generation was created, they created Urdu as an official language, dividing me and giving me not an opportunity to join any jobs in government. So we were ethnically cleansed, not by gun in 1990. We were ethnically cleansed through many other measures. Reservations in government colleges, reservations in engineering colleges, reservation in medical colleges, reservations in jobs. Everything was basically meant for the Muslim population. You had to be a Muslim to basically get into a medical college or an engineering college. So all this thing was brewing under various regimes and under the patronage of Government of India, which principally was Congress for a lot of years. And when we got our first Muslim home minister, it all happened. Now, Bashani Saab mentioned that there was a story about that Jagmohan did it. It was not Jagmohan. In fact, the story is that Jagmohan landed the very next day. He landed in Kashmir as a governor for the third term on 20th of January, while as we were hounded on the night of January 19th. Gentlemen, when I remember that night, I was a 21-year-old, and that night still sends chills in my spine when I remember that night 31 years back when it all happened. There was no government, there was no administration, there was no police or army to protect us. Hundreds and thousands of people came on the road with mashals, they lit bonfires on the roads, they did death dances, and they raised slogans that we will make this Kashmir as Pakistan without the women of Hindus, their sisters and their daughters. So the ghosts of 1947, the ghosts of Kabaili raid in Kashmir came back. And for many people, gentlemen, it was a second exodus. It was a second displacement. There were many people, many Hindus who in 1947 at the time of partition came to this part of India, which was Kashmir. And for them, I'm talking about Kashmiri Hindus, and for them it was a second exodus of sorts. There were hundreds of Kashmiri Hindu women were raped, and there were some instances where the girls, after gang raping, they were basically chopped on an electrical saw. So the ghosts of those Islamic barbaric rulers, whether they were from Afghanistan, or whether they were from Turkey, or they were Mughals. Those things were recreated in Kashmir in 1990, gentlemen. Tortures, rapes, arsons, looting. It was so rampant. And they forced basically 500,000 of Kashmiri Hindu diaspora, which was basically the original aborigines of Kashmir. They were forced to flee. And we were thrown out. We became refugees in our own land. Gentlemen, I'll tell you a story about so many of Kashmiri Hindu women and men who had not even come to Srinagar from their villages. Kashmir was so diverse, there were like more than 600 villages in Kashmir Valley. And there were many people, many men and women who had not even visited Jammu in their lifetimes. They didn't know the language. They didn't have they were never used to such harsh temperatures. So we didn't die just in the valley. And the apathy of the governments those time, the Congress government or the Janata Party government, which was under VP Singh that time, we were unsung. Nobody came to wipe our tears. Nobody visited our tattered tents. We died slowly. Hundreds of men and women died because of frostbite, because of snake bites. They died because of heat strokes, and many perished slowly with frustrations and yearning to go back. The world remained silent 31 years back, and the world still remains silent. We only talk, when it comes to Kashmir, it means only Muslims. They don't talk about Kashmiri Hindus. And for the world at large, they were only thinking Kashmir as a valley, but they forgot that Kashmir is not just Jammu Kashmir, is basically 3 regions. It is Ladakh, which is principally Buddhist followers are there. The majority population is Buddhist. Then there is Kashmir, where 98% population was Muslim. And then there is Jammu, which is basically Hindu dominated. But when it comes to the whitewashed journalism, when it comes to the Western media, who remained silent at that time, they only talk about Kashmiri Hindus. They only talk about Kashmiri Muslims. They talk about the atrocities, but they forgot that they were the ones who basically forced 500,000 Kashmiri Hindus, the peaceful population of Kashmir. They were forced by not a Pakistani militant, not an Afghani militant, or a mercenary from Iran. They were forced to leave their home and earth by their own neighbors. The so-called Kashmiriat, which is basically coined as the panacea for all the evils, there is no such Kashmiriat. For me, Kashmiriat is Kashmir plus Shariat. I still remember those loudspeakers playing.
Can I ask you a question?
Please go.
I just want to know, I know the atrocities done to Kashmiri Pandits and Hindus and all that. My question is, why didn't Pandits and Hindus and other minorities form a militant group to counter the onslaught of Muslim rulers or Muslim jihadis? Why see, you are asking for, somebody will come and help you, but you have to protect yourself.
No, but that's an unfair question, because the Indian state has an army and millions and billions are spent on the protection of the state. But you have to ask yourself one question. 500,000 people became refugees in their own home, and not even people in UP or Bihar or Andhra or anyone was bothered. VP Singh was more bothered about his coalition.
See, at that time, VP Singh was
I'll give you a specific answer. Allow me to speak.
Right.
Now you're talking about we were just 2% in Kashmir in 1990. Now you can imagine we did basically an exodus. We were forced to basically leave the place, and there was no support of anybody. Now the Kashmiri Muslims got all the support from Pakistan in terms of arms, in terms of trainings across the border in Azad Kashmir or the so-called the Pak occupied Kashmir. They got support from there. Now there was nobody to support us. Even today, as Tariq Fatah said, that it's not a matter of Kashmir only. There are hundreds of Kashmirs at the moment, brewing in every part of India. There's Malda, and there are so many places in down south. There is Kerala, for example, which is basically brewing. So I'm telling the Indian governments, I'm talking to all the Hindus of the world, that if we do not basically wake up now, we will have more Kashmirs. We will have more Kashmiri Pandits like situation happening in every part of India. We have to wake up, and it's a wake-up call for all of us. We have to basically do a campaign. We have to basically start from Kashmir, that why it happened in Kashmir and why it should not happen in other parts of the world. Now, there is another point of it. It's an ideology, Pradeep ji. We follow a different ideology. Radical Islam followers follow a different ideology. Now I can tell you, we had all the reasons to pick up guns in 1990, but probably that's not our ideology. We believe in live and let live. We believe in forgive and forget. Probably we will not forget them. We may forgive them. So we made in those adverse times when we were living in tents, we picked up pen and not the gun. We have produced 50,000 engineers in last 30 years of our exodus to make this world a better place to live in. But the time has come that we should also speak the same language, and we should basically make the world aware that what's happening in Kashmir and what may happen in every other part of India, and also in our backyard in Canada. It is happening in Germany, and things are happening there. It's happening in France. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in New Zealand. It's happening in every part of the world. The world, the leaders, the leadership, they have to take cognizance of these facts, that what's happening. London is called Londonistan. Why? There's a reason behind it. We have allowed those Islamic radicals to basically rule, and probably it's happening in our own backyard also. We know what's
Vidyaji,
happening in Canada.
would you like to focus maybe 1 or 2 minutes on the 370 and 35A abrogation and why it happened?
AG 370 was an article which basically alienated Kashmir from the rest of India. Now, I'll give a small example. Had Article 370 not been there, and I blame it to the Congress regime, which basically allowed a temporary and transient article to be there for like 70 years. I salute the government of India, the current regime, the Modi government, to basically take it off. Now, had this Article 370 not been there, Kashmir would have been like any other part of India and the most prosperous part of India. Why people pick up guns? Most of the time, it's because of radicalization. But sometimes when people are having jobs, when people are gainfully employed, they are educated, they may not take the job. I may contradict when it comes to Osama bin Laden and many others who were educated, but they still picked up the guns. But Kashmir would have been a different place. Article 370 was anti-women, it was anti-LGBTQ community, it was anti-human. It had all the ingredients of not allowing the Kashmir, the Jammu Kashmir, to have the final amalgamation with the Union of India. Now Article 370 has been removed. I can see now it's so evident. How many stone pelting cases has anybody noticed since the Article 370 has been repealed? How many bomb blasts have happened? Because when a government decides to stand by with an iron fist, things happen. We had a lackluster government. We had Congress government which allowed these radicals, which allowed these anti-national forces to basically develop and strengthen. And I'm sure that with the new government in place, it's a resurgent India, and I'm sure that we will go back. I mean, that's a dream of my 80-year-old father, who never thought that we will ever think of going to Kashmir. But after the Article 370 and 35A have been abrogated, my dad still dreams that he will go back to his home. That's our dream. And I will like to tell all the Indians and Indian diaspora around the world that wake up. It's a wake-up call for all of us. Let not there be another Kashmir in any other part of India. Back to you, Pradeep ji.
Well said.
I just want
Very well said.
last question. I just wanted to ask you, Vidyaji, if you can elaborate, what is the situation in Jammu and Kashmir right now after abrogation of Article 370 35A? Is it conducive to all these Pandits to go back to their homeland and settle there? Is there anything need to be done?
Pradeep ji, it's a very good question. Government of India and some other governments like Manmohan Singh government tried to basically resettle Kashmiris back in Kashmir. But the point is, they are trying to settle us where we came from. My house is my house is in downtown Kashmir, which is surrounded by a Muslim majority populace. Now I don't want to go there and become a sitting duck so that anybody can come and kill me anytime or take away our woman. No, I don't want to do that. There is no solution till there is a population, either there's a population balance in Kashmir, where a 99 or 98% of Muslim population is reduced to 50%, or the alternate way is that we want a separate homeland under a union territory status. We want to basically go back to our Kashmir at our own terms. We don't want to basically go back to those places where we can be killed anytime. So my point is that government of India is doing a wonderful job, but they have to also understand that the Valley Muslims are radicalized. As Tariq Fatah said, that there is a concept of Ghazwa-e-Hind. They want to convert all the non-Muslims into Islam. They want to destroy their temples and their worship places. And I tell you, I remember in Kashmir, even in the peaceful times, whenever there was anything happening in the Islamic world, it will basically fall on us. They will either vandalize our temples, they will burn a couple of houses, or they will even kill our people. I remember they invoking Allah to basically decimate our seeds. They used to say, "Batanun Biol Khoda and Gol," that the seed of Kashmiri Hindus is decimated by Allah. This is basically the call. The mentality is the same. Nothing has changed in the last 500 years. And as I repeatedly say, I was not hounded from my home by a Pakistani mercenary or a trained militant. I was hounded by my next door neighbor. I was hounded by my class fellow with whom I shared the same school bench. I was hounded by the same class fellow with whom I watched Indian movies. I was hounded by the same class fellow with whom I used to play cricket. It was a stab in the back. And I tell you, the history repeats itself. When Qabilis attacked Kashmir, and when Maharaja Hari Singh was the ruler of Kashmir, 70% of his army was Muslims, and they didn't pick up the arms. They basically stabbed in the back of their own ruler, and they went back, and Kashmir was left to those dogs, and those Qabilis destroyed small cities like Baramulla, where Kashmiri Hindu and Sikh women were en masse raped, and Sikhs and Hindus were killed. So my request to government of India at this forum is that we don't want to go back to Kashmir. Even if they want us to rehabilitate in Kashmir, we want to go there on our own terms. We don't want to basically go back to the same people whom we trusted for 7 exoduses. It's enough. If we have not learned that we should mistrust those very people for 7 exoduses for over 500 years, we will be living in a fool's paradise. So we want to go back at our own terms. We want to go back to our own homeland, which is a long-standing request by Kashmiri Hindus, that we want to go back to Kashmir, but at our own terms, not become sitting down.
Vijay, I will suggest that probably you can suggest to the government that they have a gated secured community, in which you Pandit can stay there with a boundary wall and fully secured. That's the only solution I can see.
We call it Panun Kashmir. Panun Kashmir means my Kashmir. That proposal is with government of India. It's been there for the last 30 years, and a full generation of our leaders has basically grown old fighting for that cause. It may not basically sound very logical in terms of the democracy we have, because we are a secular state. But government of India has to find out a way that we have to go back. Kashmiri Hindus have to go back to their home. And a lot of people may say that I'm settled in Canada, I may not go back to home. That's nobody's prerogative. I may go there for 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week. That's my prerogative. But I want to go back to my temple. I want to basically worship my own temples there without any threat to my life and my honor.
Thanks, Vijay.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I'll just ask Barrister Hamid ji. The question is, what do you think, how many percentage of people in Pakistan occupied Kashmir or Gilgit-Baltistan want to come to India? They want the state to be merged with India. And what do you see as a way forward so that POK, Gilgit and Baltistan can be integrated into India? How that can happen? Can that happen? And how that can happen?
First of all, the question from Mohtaram Tariq Sahab, jo kaha na inhone ke why you don't consider Azad Kashmir as a Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So I have already explained that both Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan they were occupied by force, and they are still in that situation. As far as the status of those territories are concerned, they are occupied territories. And
so we should call them. Then we should call them Pakistan occupied Kashmir.
Yeah.
My point is that if they're occupied and we accept that they're occupied, then there should be
That's
no
why I'm
reluctance.
explaining. That's what I'm explaining, that that is their status. That is not their name. Their status is occupied, but name is either Galgit Baltistan or Azad Kashmir. We people
No,
who
the
live
name
there.
Azad Kashmir, there is no such place.
Yeah, but
There is,
that was the name which was named by the people and
who
territories in
occupied it?
1947, and
Sir,
since then,
that was the name that was taken after the Pakistan army and its 30,000
I know the
gangs.
context why it was taken. I have already said that it was occupied. It's same thing like Pakistan. Pakistan means a territory where Pak people are living.
No, no,
All,
no, it's an abbreviation. Sorry, sir.
no, no,
Pakistan is an
yeah,
abbreviation.
but what it means the Pakistan, a place where Pak people live.
No,
Azad
sir,
Kashmir,
ऐसा ना करें ना, sir. This is
Azad
Chaudhry Rahmat
Kashmir,
Ali's
Azad Kashmir.
abbreviation of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kashmir,
चलें ठीक है, आपकी बात
Balochistan, and
मान
Sindh.
लेते हैं सर, लेकिन मैं अपना एक्सप्लेन कर रहा हूँ कि मैं उसको इसलिए आजाद कश्मीर कहता हूँ
Okay,
कि
ठीक है, it's okay.
वहां पे जितने लोग रहते हैं ना, all we people who were born and raised there, we knew only this name, but
But
we
Sir,
never consider it.
let's stay in
We never
Hindi.
consider it as Azad. I explain everywhere. We consider it as a occupied territory. So coming back to the question of Pardeep Saab, so how many people they would like to be the part of India in Galgit Baltistan or Azad Kashmir? Let me tell you one thing. Uh, these people, they were forced to be in a situation where they are. They have never decided to be either part of Pakistan or to be the part of the existing status, which is what we were discussing right now. There is a situation where we live in a constant fear, kind of a situation where people, they are oppressive, not only by the one force, it could be military, it could be security forces, it could be police, it could be bureaucracy, all kind of pressure and oppression is present there in both territories. So at this point of time, most of the people, they are unable to express their wishes and their opinion very clearly, I'm telling you, because they are not living in a situation where they can come out and express, oh, I want to be part of this and part of that. What happening is there right now, Pakistan is projecting a situation where they are presenting that these areas, everybody is dying to be the part of Pakistan. Rather, actually, they consider themselves already part of Pakistan. That's what the Pakistan is trying to present. But I can draw your attention toward different international polls, impartial polls conducted by different political and non-political impartial groups, showing that 99% people of that territory, they don't want to be the part of Pakistan very clearly. If you look at any poll conducted by impartial organization. But at this point of time, you don't see anybody coming out clearly and saying, oh, we want to be the part of India. Because of this conflict between India and Pakistan, and anybody who says that is considered to be a traitor, considered to be enemy, and considered to be somebody who should be eliminated right away. And people who did that couple of times, they disappeared. It's just like the same situation in Balochistan. I would say even more sensitive when it comes to the comparison between India and Pakistan. But if the people of Kashmir, they are given chance to decide about their future without any pressure from any side, I believe that their decision will be totally different, because people, they can see that there is no comparison between a state who is making remarkable progress in every walk of life, in science, in technology, in international trade, in development, everything. And then there is a state who is in a situation where you can see that they are running their day-to-day affairs by borrowing the money and begging and things like this. So when people, they make a decision like this of their future, I think they keep in mind their economic interest, their socio-political interest, and their cultural interest. So culturally speaking, socially speaking, people of these territories, they are part of the Indian subcontinent. No matter how many differences you can bring up or you can create, but at the end of the day, they are part of the Indian subcontinent and they understand that. But they were never allowed to express their opinion what they really want. And when this system which is in place there, for example, system of rigging the election and place the government of their own liking, post-polling rigging, pre-polling rigging, and even you see these election in Gilgit-Baltistan recently, what happened that a party who was not even existing there just a month before election became the largest party of that territory. Same thing is going to happen in Azad Kashmir. We are waiting for election in next couple of months, and you will see the party today, which is the largest party of that territory, which is Nawaz Sharif party, is going to be the smallest one, and Imran Khan party is going to emerge as the largest party overnight. So what we call it is the invisible forces in these two territories. They control the opinion, they control the election, they control the so-called democracy. So unless we get some safeguard, some protection from the international community or some other means that the people, they will not be slaughtered, they will not be, killed and disappeared, I think they will be able to make the decision which will be totally.
Hamidji, I just asked a question. Like, the Bangladesh has separated after India's action with the support of the local people. I'm just asking a question. If suppose India takes some military action, will the people of POK, Gilgit-Baltistan support India cause and be part of India, like which happened in Bangladesh? Will they be able to support Indian army or Indian forces?
There will be a lot of people, they will do that, and there will be a lot of people who will fight for Pakistan as well, I can tell you, because there is a division. There are both kind of people.
So if there is no room, मैं फिर चलता हूँ.
आप बताएं साहब, तारिक जी अभी आपसे पूछ रहे हैं क्वेश्चन. तारिक भाई.
Pradeep ji, let us get to the audience questions now. We have got a lot of audience questions.
नहीं, वो तारिक जी जा रहे हैं, मेरे ख्याल उन्होंने वो माइक पे हटा दिया है. I think he got upset because he was not asked a question or given a time. तारिक जी, आप
अगर मौका हो तो बात करें, वरना कान लगा के बैठ के क्या कर रहे हैं?
आप बताएं, कुछ कहना चाह रहे थे, आप बताएं आप बताएं.
3-4 दफा कर रहा हूँ.
नहीं, your mic sir, your turn.
एक रियलिटी को आप मान नहीं रहे हैं कि वो पूरा एरिया चाइना के अंडर ऑक्यूपेशन है, और बात हम कर रहे हैं पाकिस्तान, गिलगित बल्तिस्तान. यानी are we insane? Are we blind? We don't know what is happening?
No, this was my next
entire
question.
Area has been taken by the Chinese military since 1974. There is no Pakistan over there. There is no Gilgit-Baltistan. It's a Chinese army. They have the factories there. The Chinese prisons are there. The Chinese companies use Chinese labor from the prison systems to outbid the Pakistani companies in the CPAC development. The situation is far different and not that specific of what you're saying, who will support whom. No, they will not support the Indian army, I can tell you, because they realize that once, even in Kargil, when there was nothing in front of the Indian army withdrew. After defeating the Pakistan army, the officers wanted to go back home. So they went back home. Do you have anyone around to explain that the Pakistan army was defeated? There was not a single soldier for 100 miles, and Gilgit-Baltistan is sovereign Indian territory by its constitution. And yet the Indian army said, चलो घर चलते हैं, चले गए। बांग्लादेश में, look, I'm being critical of India as well. In Bangladesh, you took 5,000 war criminals. And despite the fact Mukti Baini and Sheikh Mujib were asking them to be handed over for war crime trials, कौल साहब ने और इंदिरा गांधी ने उठा के वो 50,000, 5,000, 50,000 तो 90,000 तो POWs थे. But the 5,000 war criminals and rapists were handed over to Pakistan. Today now they are being hanged by Sheikh Mujib's daughter, Hasina Sheikh jo hai, she is running the war crime trials and hanging them. You cannot do this, that not understand the broader geopolitical game that is being played against you and take tiny measures. How can the Kashmiri Pandits go back to Kashmir? It is a death sentence for them to go there. And the calling for gated communities is like Israeli settlements in West Bank. It will not be accepted. You will walk into a trap in which you will become the laughing stock of the world. We want the West to understand that India is the only ally for a democratic status, for the sanity of Western civilization. It's an anchor over there. We cannot do things in a fascist manner and then expect this. Pakistan, when India had a chance in 71, it backed out. It gave complete license to Pakistan to regenerate. They could have gone straight to Hyderabad. They withdrew their army. They went to Lahore in 1965. They came back with a bus. You have to understand that unless Indians become militants in a way that they serve in the Indian army with the ordinary soldier for at least 1 year, there will always be two classes, an officer cadre and the Gurkhas or the Biharis or whoever is fighting over there. On the Pakistan side, you have one people, the same guy, the same officer, the same. It's like the Israeli army. You become a soldier, then you become a general. In India, it's not the case. You have to be determined. You cannot win. You have been stabbed in your back, your arms have been cut off, but your attitude is still, कि यार देखी जाएगी, कुछ अब कर लेंगे बात. Unless you shut down Wagah and say, no Indian will dance for some Pakistani at the border, टांगे ऊपर नीचे पता नहीं क्या करते हैं, you should protest. We don't want your tomatoes and onions and bloody cement or anything. We don't want Aman ki Asha at all. Anybody, any Indian who writes in the Times, New York Times against India, at least I have the right to take a tomato and throw it at her face. How can, all articles against India are written by Indians? It's not Pakistanis who write that. Because these upper middle class Indians have become like, I don't know, the F-16s of India, and they have the right to write in Time magazine or New York Times, Washington Post. हमको गुस्सा आ जाता है पाकिस्तानी की, why are you lying about India? But not even denunciation comes from the Ministry of External Affairs. You should have people over there who would, immediately say, how dare you say this? In 15 minutes, Pakistanis can get 10,000 people in New York City. I was there when Modi ji spoke and Imran Khan spoke. All the Pakistanis came in a jaloos, all the Indians came in a bus. Kiski suni jayegi? The people walking down New York Avenue with Hindustan, Barbadi or pata nahi qatl karo ye wo, or the Indians doing folk dances in Ghagra pehna, dum baja rahe. You need to be militants in a non-violent way. Your thinking should be ke कैसे किया, सावरकर जिंदाबाद बोल के तो देखिए एक दफा. किसी ने पढ़ा पाकिस्तान में सावरकर को? Indians are attacking Savarkar. Why? What has poor guy done to them? भगत सिंह का नहीं है नाम, आप राजा दाहिर के नाम की सड़क रखिए, मैं आपसे बताता हूं कैसे ये people will shake up. The biggest Hindu Maharaja who fought against the Arabs doesn't have a street named after him, and Lodi Gardens is named. मेरे साथ 100 आदमी चले, लोधी गार्डन को जला देते हैं, 5 साल जेल काटेंगे, चलिए, आई नीड 100 पीपल, आई विल बर्न दैट बास। उसने काशी के टेंपल को अटैक नहीं किया, बाबर ने नहीं किया है, ये औरंगजेब ने नहीं किया है, तैमूर ने नहीं किया है। नाम कैसे को रखता है तैमूर इंडिया में? There should be a protest on the street. इसलिए पोलैंड में बच्चे का नाम हिटलर रख दिया आप। So my point is that गिलगित बाल्टिस्तान को भूल जाए because is it under China. China is importing Pakistani prostitutes to fulfill the demand of their soldiers. They're kidnapping Pakistani Christian women and taking them over there. किसी को पता नहीं है. The Sindhis want to separate, the Baloch want to separate from Pakistan. गिलगित बल्तिस्तान आप भूल जाइए, जो आपके साथ मिलना चाहते हैं, सिंधु देश जिंदाबाद कर रहे, बलूचिस्तान में पहाड़ों पे लिखा अब की बार मोदी सरकार, वहां तो आप कंबल भी नहीं दे सकते. You can't even, after Modi ji's speech mentioning Balochistan, nobody said anything about Balochistan. They're alone, dying, fighting with no support. So that is the area you concentrate.
Tariq ji, Pradeep ji, just one point. Tariq ji, one point which has come from the audience,
Yes.
and for you, and while we're on the topic, why is the issue of human rights violation of Kashmiri Hindus in this context not on
Yes.
the agenda of human rights activists? And what can we do as a collective majority of right-thinking people? What should we all do? Your thoughts, please.
Okay. First of all, the atrocities being committed by Muslims around the world is of such high concentration that in Syria, 500,000 Syrian Muslims have been killed by fellow Muslims. That's Syria. Yemen, the civil war has destroyed the country. There's famine over there. लाखों मुसलमान के मारे जा रहे. Turkey has killed more Muslim Kurds than anyone can imagine. Muslims are killing Muslims at a level that you cannot comprehend. And you need to understand that they've been killing Muslims from the day Islam was born. The first war of apostasy was fought 8 months after the Prophet Muhammad died. They killed 26,000 Arab Muslims of the Prophet's time by saying, not good Muslim, kafir. Killed them. The Prophet's family had to flee to Sindh to escape butchery at the hands of the Umayyad Arab Muslims. So, Kashmiri Hindus and their atrocities against them from a worldwide perspective is a very tiny dot. Plus, it has been made worse by the silence of the rest of India. If you look at, I've gone through every newspaper in India during 1970. Do you know that I could not find one Indian Muslim who supported the Bangladesh movement? Not one. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad said, this is, madam, the internal affairs of Pakistan. So, the inability of the general population to think politically and say, ye hamara Hindustan mein, hamare Hindu, Hindustan mein refugee bana diya. I haven't heard anyone from Maharashtra say that. Shiv Sena ne kuch nahi bola hai. वो DMK, AIDMK, कोई नहीं बोलता. Communist Party, कितनी, there are 5,000 political parties. They don't say anything because each one has not yet, I get a feeling, not yet accepted कि Hindustan उनका है.
Tariq ji, very, very interesting. While you're talking on this, there's a question from Alexander from Sydney, who says,
Yes.
Sydney Morning Herald, which is a well-known newspaper here, and there's an article published by Emily Schmall in New York Times, which says situation in Indian Kashmir is very bleak and highly militarized. I wonder what the truth is, and he wants to hear the comments from you, please.
Look, I'm considering the fact, let me take it as true, assume that hypothetically it's true that it's bleak. What is it about a New York Times reporter that he finds the massacre going on in Balochistan not bleak? What part of an American journalist says, oh, 50,000 dead? No, I think there's been a road accident where 3 people died. I'm going to cover that story for the New York Times. It is the Pakistan ISI that works out of every diplomatic mission everywhere in the world, from Auckland, New Zealand to Australia to Canada, everywhere throughout Europe. They are the ones who take journalists there, and they are the ones who expel journalists, like the latest book that has come out about the 9 lives of Pakistan or something. I forget, very famous author. He's expelled from Pakistan. And now for an Australian to think this tiny bit of land is manipulating everything, then they have to understand that every terrorist in the last 30 years around the world has a Pakistani link. But just because we look like Uber drivers, yeah, grocery store runner, yeah, not very sexy type of people, we don't get pointed at. 200 of our missiles are pointed at Europe. So Europe doesn't consider us a threat. They consider Iran a threat that has no missiles. So Western media has been manipulated by the entertainment provided, and entertainment, I don't mean in a disparaging way, in the lobbying done by Pakistan ISI paid Indian journalists. There are Indian journalists who say Bangladesh, there was no genocide. You read that. She was the sister-in-law of a major Pakistani journalist, but it came from Calcutta. She said there has been no genocide in Bangladesh. And she's so respectable. Her English is so fluent. She, this is the problem. That in India, you have upper middle class people who hate India. They pray for Fair and Lovely to have been their skin, and that they should have lived in Europe somewhere and not in this Ganda India, sab kale kale, gharib log rehte hain. This is a problem that is facing. I don't blame the journalists for not knowing.
Thanks, Dr. Ji. Devendra Ji, you have a question for Vidya Ji. Can you please go ahead?
Yeah, Vidya Ji, also I have a question, not a question, but a comment on what Tariq Babu said. Tariq Babu, आप जो कह रहे हैं upper class or middle class Indians who don't care about India, ये majority नहीं है. हमारे जैसे लोग भी हैं, please don't forget. पर कुछ लोग हैं, बरखा दत्त जैसे, अनुरिधि दत्ता जैसे, जो कि पेड हैं. बरखा दत्त के 100 crore assets हैं. You know, they are being investigated now. Who paid them money? I know one journalist from India who was offered $26,000 to speak for 5 minutes when he was attending a conference in Sweden against India. And this from Hindu. He is from the Hindu that's published in Chennai. तो ये थोड़े से लोग हैं, and now Modi ji is BJP government is coming out against them. तो इसको प्लीज आप जनरलाइज ना करें.
ना मैं जनरलाइज इसलिए कर रहा हूँ. देखिए मेरी बात सुनिए. अगर मैं जनरलाइज नहीं करूंगा तो आप समझेंगे नहीं. आप लोग इंडियन हैं, फिलॉसफी में बिलीव करते हैं, नुक्ताचीनी करके यू गो टू द सब एटॉमिक लेवल. हम पंजाबी हैं, हमको इतनी टाइम नहीं है. क्या हमको जो नजर आते हैं चोर, हम कहते हैं यार नस गया चोर है, तो 2 जुती लाओ नहीं. अब मुझे आप फार्मर्स प्रोटेस्ट बताइए, उसमें पाकिस्तान का हाथ नहीं है क्या?
ठीक है.
It's a Pakistani hand in that. The Khalistanis are doing it from Canada. Please, this is propaganda war. We have to win this right there.
You're right.
We need to philosophize. We need to say, हमको निकाला है अपने कश्मीर से.
बिल्कुल आप ठीक है.
I am a Kashmiri Pandit.
बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं.
हम टी-शर्ट बना के घूमे, I am a Kashmiri Pandit.
इसीलिए हमारे जैसे ग्रुप ऑफ फैक्ट्स इंडिया ग्रुप है.
नहीं, thank you very much. By the way, I mistakenly left your group on WhatsApp, so don't think I abandoned the group.
We created it for that purpose and we are spreading the message all throughout the world. जैसे मैंने कहा, हमारे hundreds of thousands IITians हैं USA में, UK में भी है, there lots of them will get this. But आपने बात बहुत सही पते की है. It should be written in gold.
So Devendra ji, your question to Vidya ji.
अच्छा, yeah, I have a question to Vidya ji. विद्या जी, मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहता हूँ, बैरिस्टर Bashani very quickly mentioned about the
Devendra ji,
economic
can you
and
please,
scientific.
Devendra, can you please speak in English? We have some
sure.
people who don't understand Hindi.
Yes. Sorry, I made the mistake. Yeah, Barrister Bashani talked very briefly on the development that is taking place in Kashmir following Article 370 on the scientific and economic front. But I want to ask a Kashmiri who's been there, like Vidyaji, that as I learned from my Kashmiri friends who live in Sydney, who are Hindus, they said that tourism is returning back to Kashmir. Now with the snowfall, all hotels in Kashmir Valley, Srinagar, are full. And the apples have started going back to Delhi as they used to once, the Azad market, the biggest market of Asia. And so many economic benefits are flowing because of the abrogation of Article 370. And here the Pakistani consul, as Tariq Babu very correctly says, spreading the word, bloods of river are flowing there. So can somebody please enlighten us on the economic benefits that happen out of abrogation of Article 370 and 35A?
Devendraji, thank you so much for the very valid question.
And CAA also.
Absolutely. So to begin with, basically, the real amalgamation of India and Kashmir has happened after the 370 was abrogated. It was a shame, which I will say again, that a temporary and transient article was there for such a long time. Now, what has actually happened? First of all, Kashmir was basically more of a sultanate, for example. Like, for example, if Devendra Jain, a proud Indian, wants to do a business in Kashmir, before August 5th, 2019, you had to basically have a local sponsor, exactly like what happened in Saudi Arabia, which is called basically a kafil. The business will be on his name, and you will be just working for him, and he can chuck you out anytime. That's exactly what was happening in Kashmir. You had to have a local sponsor. You can't buy an inch of land there. Now, after the abrogation of Article 370, any Indian can buy a land, whether it's agriculture, industrial, or even residential land. That's one of the biggest things. So now what's happening, and I'm proud that I'm part of, I'm one of the directors of Global Kashmiri Pandits Business Foundation, which is basically hand in gloves with the current government of Kashmir, the JKUT, felicitating investors from across the world to invest in Kashmir. See, Kashmir can be developed into a fantastic Silicon Valley replica model. It's basically environmentally friendly, and there is a lot of local talent available in Kashmir as well as Jammu. So you can see. So similarly, if you see before 2019, there was not a single 5-star hotel of repute in Kashmir. There was not an international airport in Kashmir. So what was the reason? The reason was the same. Security was one of the reasons, and nobody was willing to invest in Kashmir because of obvious reasons. There were industries which I started working in 89. So there was a place called Rangret where we had an electronic development complex, where we had factories which was invested by big houses like Singanias and RPG Group and some other groups. And after 89, that was all destroyed. All the investments was destroyed. I mean, people become stupid, basically. They basically destroy the same reasons which can basically, allow their children to grow, allow their families to grow, because they become radicalized because of whatever reasons. Now, after the abrogation of Article 370, Jammu and Kashmir has got a union territory status. Ladakh has got a union territory status. More business will basically grow. More investors from across the world will come. Government of India and government of JKUT is basically giving a lot of facilities, which will attract a lot of people to come to Kashmir and invest. So when basically these things will happen, obviously prosperity will come. People will shun guns. That's basically looking at a larger picture. We hope. I mean, as long as radicalization doesn't basically take them back. So you must have seen in last 1 year, the number of atrocities, the number of killings, the number of bomb blasts, number of stone pelting cases has all gone down. And one of the major reasons before this was that the money which was spent, a lot of money was basically spent on Jammu Kashmir by the government of India. but it was going to some 3 or 4 families, and it never reached the common man. So that was basically what was happening before that time. And similarly, like, things will change. There was a sizable community of people, the Hindus, who came from Pakistan and settled down in Kashmir. For 7 decades, they were not basically given the status of a citizen. So they were basically not given the facilities to go to colleges, universities, and get government jobs. That will happen now. There was the community which was basically, as Tariq Fatah said in the beginning, that from Amritsar in the 1950s, Valmiki community was basically invited to come from Amritsar and settle down in Kashmir to basically do the menial work, the cleaning work. And they were promised the same thing. And the Western forces in the Muslim-dominated Kashmiri government didn't allow them. And as Tariq ji said, that a PhD girl who basically did her biochemistry PhD from the Valmiki community was asked to basically join the cleaning services. So how inhuman it can be. Now, with the abrogation of Article 370, all those things are going back. Like, for example, my own cousin is married to a non-Kashmiri. Now, you can imagine the absurdity of that Article 370. Now, if a Kashmiri girl, irrespective of whether she's a Muslim or Hindu, if she marries an Indian, anybody from outside Kashmir, she loses her right to her father's property. But if she marries a Pakistani, that Pakistani will get basically the citizenship right in Kashmir. How stupid it can be. It is exactly the same stupid idea of creating Pakistan, East and West Pakistan with a 1,200-kilometer corridor in between. I mean, this was an absurd article. It is gone, it's history. And we are basically very much, happy that the new government is taking all those measures. Basically, we have been basically apologetic for the last 7 decades. In Bangladesh, during all the wars, we have given away territories, we have given away prisoners of wars, we have given war criminals back. Now, this new government, this new resurgent India means business. We have basically done Balakot, we have done basically attacks cross border. We know how to basically give replies in their own terms. And I'm sure that Pakistan knows now that who is basically at the helm of affairs in India, and they will basically not. But once a rogue state, as Taliji said again, I'm referring to is anything which is happening around the world when it comes to terrorism, the connections are basically back to Pakistan. It's high time that the government of India takes a strict measure, declare Pakistan a rogue state, sever all the diplomatic relations. We don't need a diplomatic relations with the rogue state, which is eventually getting balkanized. Pakistan is going to break. I'm telling you on this panel, it is going to break in 4 pieces, and that's good for India. Because
and good for Pakistan.
Tell me,
yeah, and it's good for Pakistan as well. Absolutely, absolutely. There'll be 4 Pakistans, whatever they be called. Since should be separate, we should support all those people. Pakistan has basically supported our people, our Kashmiri people, for wrong reasons. But we have to support Balochis. We have to support Sindhis for all the good reasons, for the betterment of this world, to make this world a better place to live in. Because when a rogue state with nuclear arms is basically getting out of control, they need to be basically cut into place.
Just tell me about the benefits and disbenefits of CAA, because there is a lot of misinformation in Australia about CAA, and David Shoebridge of Green Party, he moved a motion on CAA too, saying India is a fascist state. So can you elaborate on benefits and disbenefits?
There's a lot of misinformation on CAA. There's a lot of misinformation on the CAA, created by, again, those leftist forces and the Lutyens people in Delhi. First of all, CAA doesn't allow or basically give opportunity to all the Hindus and Sikhs and Jains and other non-Muslim communities in Pakistan and Bangladesh and Afghanistan to come to India. No, the CAA allows only those people who have basically come to India as refugees. And like any other country, like Canada has basically refused a lot of people. So we are basically following the same rule, that those people who are already in India since a particular time and date, they will be allowed the citizenship. So when it comes to, okay, why Muslims are not? There is a separate process. We have given citizenship to Adnan Sami. He's a Muslim. He's not a Hindu or a Jain. So there is a separate process for that. So, I mean, in very short words, most of the stuff which is basically happening in India, in the new research in India, it is being basically concocted by the Western media. We are fighting a lot of ghost enemies around the world. Western media is one. Then we have our own people who are basically being fed by Congress regime for the last 7 decades. Lutyens media, like from as many of you mentioned, people like Barkhada, people like Nidhi Razdan and Rajdeep Sardesai, they are basically creating that wedge. They are creating the misinformation. They are creating a wrong narrative. And we together, the citizens, the netizens of India and the global world have to basically break that narrative. We have to basically tell people through these programs, what you have created today. We have to tell the people what is right and what has been basically, painted. Because as they say, when a lie is repeated 1,000 times, it becomes a truth. Those cabals are basically much more stronger than us at this moment. We have to rise to the moment and basically thwart their campaign and create our own narrative, which is right, which is democratic, and which is basically for the worldly peace. Because India has a checkered history. We have a very strong history that we never basically believed in expansionism. For the last 10,000 years of recorded history, we have never attacked any country. We have never believed in that. We believe in the world as a one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is our ethos. And we want this world to become a better place to live in. And that's what we are doing and what we have been doing for the centuries. That's all I want to say.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vijay,
Can I ask a question? Sorry, can I ask a question to Mr. Tariq Fatah and Barrister Hamid Bashani? You're both, you have a very broad view of what is happening. A minority community in a Hindu majority democracy was able to do ethnic cleansing and get away with it. Nothing happened. It appears that Indians are in a slumber. They're sleeping on the wheel, and it includes Hindus as well as Indian Muslims. I would like to know from you, what was the cause of this slumber and how we can come out of it? Tariq, if you want to go first, then Hamid.
I feel that India is the only country of its type. So we cannot apply any other formula here. We've got 29 states, 400 languages, 6 religions. It is like Europe multiplied by a layer of 5 other racial types. What appears in the newspaper does not necessarily echo or resonate with other parts of India. India essentially, from my point of view, I've visited India numerous times, is localized to its state level politics to a very high degree. What happens in Bihar is very seldom known to people in Maharashtra. What's happening in Bombay today, people find it confusing elsewhere, unless they are at a level of education where they are well versed with the media. And because India has so many languages and so many nationalities living together, and right from the beginning, the word Hindu was considered to be a slur. So the moment you say Hindu, it means he's right-wing, he's fascist, everything that is negative. And this is in India that is happening. It's not that Pakistan or some other Islamic country is doing it. The left has played a very tragic role in enlightening the working class. And what I find interesting is that in India today, the Communist Party and the CPM are led by people who are not from the working class. This is not Dange or Namudripad from the 50s and 60s who were taking out, addressing problems of factory workers. This new phenomena has made a difference between what is good and evil into a very strange contrast. So when Hindus are attacked by a Muslim majority part of the state, the basic theory of the leftist is that a Muslim, because he is a minority, cannot do something wrong. For example, Black Lives Matter का अमेरिका में है, हर जगह ये लेफ्ट का ये सिलसिला चल रहा है. And so if Hindus are being targeted, in their mind, it is like white people are being targeted in America. Therefore, they're expendable. This is that soch that I, Hindu majority. So this needs to be clarified, and unfortunately, the speaking of what is a Hindu without negativity has not yet evolved. The temptation is to become anti-Muslim, and that the Muslim radical is waiting for it, like people stand in the slips to catch a catch. You know, they're just waiting for you to show any sense of hatred, then they become victims. And in this era of victimhood, the person who's persecuted suddenly becomes targeted as the bad guy. And the rest of the community is not ideologically prepared for this. The goals have gone apart. We don't have to win independence from the Britain colonial rule. We do not have hunger to eliminate. We are at a level of progress in India where we are doing pretty well, and wealth has been created, which has somehow filtered down as well. You can see that. But the concept of a Hindu civilization, Hindu yatra, if that would be the right word, people are embarrassed about it, very ashamed about it. When I say to my Muslim friends that I believe in the Hindu civilization, it takes them an hour to understand what I'm saying. That when it is a land protected by the Himalaya, protected by the Indian Ocean, it's the only country on earth जिसके नाम पे oceans का नाम है. There is no American Ocean, there is no Chinese Ocean, there is no British Ocean, but there is an Indian Ocean. There is Indochina, that's Indonesia, there's Indiana, there's Aztec Indians. Everywhere in the world, you have your presence, your language, your Sanskriti, everywhere. But it seems that people are not, let me say that, ignorant about it. I went to JNU, I asked a class in masters in politics, political science, about the difference between Baltistan and Balochistan. They thought it was the same area. So what I'm saying is that whereas the Indian Muslim and the Pakistani, his vision is extrovert. किस मुल्क पे कब्जा करना है? Iran खा गए. Iranians don't even know what the script was. Can you imagine? Persians have no idea how their language was written. Egypt disappeared. Byzantinians
we are
disappeared.
still around. We are still around, but sleeping, almost in a fainted state.
This is where the Umayyad, and remember this is purely an Arab nationalist expansionist scheme couched in Islam, launched against India, and that failed. And that is something that burns inside a lot of the pan-Islamists. So they are willing to live with Jinnah, who didn't know that in mosque you cannot wear shoes till Gandhi ji told him कि भाई गुजरातियों में जूते तो उतारो, मस्जिद है. He didn't know. He said, why? A bacon eating, whiskey drinking, who kidnapped his friend's daughter should be charged posthumously for pedophilia, became Qaid-e-Azam. क्यों? We want Muslim nationalism. We don't want somebody praying or doing good service or cleaning up. We don't want Sufis. We don't want, the dargahein jin pe hum jate hain. We want armed people who rape, who made like Temur, who created hundreds of skull pyramids of Hindus from Multan to Delhi. And you accept that? Look at the new film that has come out by Saif Ali Khan. How do you accept these things? A complete distortion of history. Because हम अपने बच्चों को कहते तुम पढ़ो, तुम्हारा एक काम, don't get into politics. Shh. Our sons become pappus, our daughters become thin, and we want to get them married fast, have a wonderful, full-fledged 20-course shadi, and then live happily ever after. And Pakistani, on the day of his marriage, his birth, his death, he's saying, Kab maine ya Allah mujhe Allah Qawmul Kafirin pe fatah naseeb kare. If I was living in India, I would say no mosque where this prayer is uttered will be given any charitable status, will be taxed.
Let us start with Western countries. If we can do it there, it would be
Sir,
much
there are
easier in India than
in Toronto. There are loudspeakers allowed on the mosques the day Allahabad High Court decided that it had to be crushed. Over here, your NRIs just sit at home. Evening parties and dinners. मैं यही कहता हूँ. Nobody comes out. Vidya should be given credit. He's the only person who went to a mosque and we had a protest outside it. Right? Am I right, sir? कहाँ गए Vidya? We did it.
Yeah.
सब कह रहे गड़बड़ हो जाएगी, गड़बड़ होते मतलब क्या गड़बड़ होगी? हम मुसलमान हैं, आप हिंदू हैं, हम साथ खड़े हैं. Don't say anything against Hindus. They never said a word after that. We were only 10 people.
I would like to ask Barrister Hamid Bashani, you also see that Indians are asleep on the wheel, Hindus are asleep, and Muslims are also asleep. How can we come out of it? What should Indians do, or what should any one of us do so that we can come out of it?
Well, I think Tariq Saab has explained this very well. I agree with him. But as far as I am concerned, I think that, the situation, the way we are handling this, I think we need to respect the more diversity and the colors. India is all about different colors, as he said. 100 of languages, 100 of culture, and 100 kind of people, races, things like that. So like any other democracy in the world, we have seen with their experiences that if they try to do anything which was against the basic principle of diversity and acceptance and tolerance, they couldn't go very far, because that could be very, very counterproductive and could have very, very negative effects on different things, on culture, on economic development, on your even reputation, things like that. So I see India very differently. I see India is a place where there is a lots of acceptance and a lesson for many, many even developed countries and very well-shaped democracies at the level of tolerance. On the same thing, the invaders. The invaders, now we have started calling them invaders openly without any hesitation. So the India tried to accept them and to accept them as part of the Indian culture and Indian society for so long. The names of the roads, things like this, was not an issue maybe 100 years ago. So what I'm saying that there is no comparison or alternative to the diversity and acceptance of each culture, each religion, and specifically each opinion. So opinion could be even different on a history, because history is all about narratives. And we have to accept the narratives, and we may differ them intellectually speaking. We can point out the errors or misunderstandings or things which are against the facts. But still the narrative will stay there. As we have seen there in Europe, there we have very different kind of narratives. The only thing European seems to be agreed on is the fascism, that it was a bad thing. Even they don't agree on the destruction of First World War and Second World War. So these things are part and parcel of the history. And I think that we need to work for more democracy, more tolerance, and more acceptance. And the most important thing is that we should accept the idea that from Afghanistan to Burma, the Indian subcontinent, people with very small differences, they are still the same people with the same historical origin, with the same heritage, with the same language. Even, this language, Hindi, Urdu, or Hindustani, what you call it, we speak anywhere, we understand each other at least. So these are, for me, these are the assets. And there are some people who are trying to use this as a tool of destruction instead of asset. So I think this way, that Indian power, because India has nothing to be afraid of. With a population like this, with a history, with all these, assets, wealth, they should not feel insecure like a very small countries. I do not understand why people even compare India and Pakistan, ignoring the facts and figures in front of them. The per capita income, the strength of the military, armies and might, tanks, and, are these things, and economic growth. Everything, if you put in front of you, you will be surprised why we will be comparing India and Pakistan. Despite all these facts that Pakistan has played a very fascist role. Once Wali Khan said that Pakistan is playing a role of badmash, a gunda in Indian subcontinent. They have done all these military actions, militancy, proxy war, everything. But at the end of the day, if we will still be on the same track and talking about the same thing and thinking about the same, way, then there will be no change. And we don't want to transfer this legacy to our new generations. This fight, war, hatred, everything, it will end nowhere. Maybe Pakistan will disappear, as Vidya said, that it will divide it into 4 countries or something like this. But still there will be some people in that part of the world who will be warmongering and hate mongering. Even they are very small, very weak. You don't have to be very strong, very forward looking and very progressive looking for warmongering or hate mongering. We need to preach peace and humanity and love, despite the fact that we have to face the warmongers and hate mongers in our society. That's all.
Thanks, Bashani ji.
The Indian subcontinent.
Thanks, Bashani ji. But I think before I conclude, Tariq ji, your last point, and I will conclude after that.
My point is, I think we are missing out what's happening in Kerala. We're missing out what's happening in West Bengal. We are missing out what's happening in the northeastern part of India. And we're missing out on the fact that in Bhopal, 100,000 people come out to attack the French president, when it is the interest of the Indian government and Indian society to have better relations with France. We were the Muslims in India came out to defend the chap who murdered people in the name of Islam. This is in Bhopal. Forget about other towns where this is happening. In Kerala, we have to be blind to not see what is the influence that is taking place over there. This is reoccurrence of the Khilafat movement, jiske andar, instead of aligning ourselves unnecessarily with the Turks who didn't want it, we started killing Hindus in Kerala. this is recent history. We cannot accept the notion that a Muslim will not have an Indian name. This needs to be understood. No,
this is what I also meant, that
yes.
Muslims in India are sleeping. And I think you're
No, they are not
describing
sleeping, sir.
why they're sleeping.
No, they are not sleeping, sir. I beg to differ. I have seen 10,000 Indian women in Delhi in burqas out crying for my blood, simply because I was doing a show on Z News called Fatah Ka Fatwa. I have never seen such rabid hatred. I was attacked by 300 Muslims. I was alone. And I refused to budge from there. It was some Urdu thing. I went there to buy some books. They gathered around. Dagardi, sir, you cannot dismiss this. We need to be peace loving enough. You cannot be an Indian by being anti-Indian. If you hate India, you're not an Indian, period. You're neither Sindhi, you're not Hindi, you're nothing. This notion that pyar aa jayega, pappi kar lo, sab theek ho jayega is nonsense. As long as the Mughals rule, they will talk of tolerance. And when you are in Hyderabad, you can hear what those people are saying when they go and contest elections in West Bengal. It is before us. There are people saying, give me 15 minutes without police, I will end all Hindus. This is in India happening now. So I'm not advocating a rabid anger or anti-Muslimness. I'm saying an asserting of yourself as the world's most dignified civilization, which was invaded and plundered by Arabs, Uzbeks, Central Asians, and truth and reconciliation only comes once you accept that your forefathers made mistakes. No one in India is willing to accept that they made mistakes. South Africa, they did. They had Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In Canada, we've had Truth and Reconciliation Commission with the Aboriginals. But in India, today too, people have simply say you cannot be this pro-Indian. What, I should be pro-Chinese for them? My 100 generations have been born over here. I've come from nowhere. I've got nothing to do with the Arabs. And yet my loyalty should be towards Arabs. That's what Jinnah's pan-Islamism is. And it has to be crushed. If you cannot take out the picture of Jinnah from Aligarh University, you have failed. Call me and I'll take it out.
Thanks, Tariq ji. I think I would love to listen to you for next 1 hour, but with the paucity of time, I think we will have to stop. With that, I would like to conclude that by thanking Barrister Hamid Bashani ji, Tariq Fateh ji, Vidya ji, and all the attendees. Sorry, I couldn't take all the questions on the panel. I know there were some more questions, but because of the lack of time, we try to follow them up in a different session. But thanks a ton to everyone for being with us and making this successful. Thank you and have a good day and good night to everyone.
Namaskar.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Namaskar.